Well, I know the road to get here wasn't easy, but we all came together to make sure that we provide the support that will make, hopefully, a difference in what you receive in your paychecks. This discussion started over a year ago at the Board of Supervisors, and it's one that I've been committed to. Thanks to the tireless work and dedication from everyone here today, we now have an ordinance that will create a path to economic success for those workers who take care of our most vulnerable communities. This starts first with our in-home support services workers. These are people who support our seniors and persons with disabilities so that they can remain in their homes and in their communities. They help with tasks that we often take for granted, like getting groceries or taking a bath or going to the doctor. I know personally about the importance of this difficult work and how challenging it can be. It was in-home support services workers who took care of my grandmother when she could no longer take care of herself. We have more than 20,000 workers who support 22,000 low-income seniors and people with disabilities in San Francisco. And if it was not for this important work these individuals do every day, so many of our seniors and adults living with disabilities would not be able to stay in their homes and get the care that we know they need. In addition to our in-home support services workers, we have many nonprofit organizations and their workers who provide essential services in San Francisco to those of all income levels and backgrounds. This ranges from healthcare to homelessness to workforce development to housing, domestic violence prevention to childcare, and so many others. These workers are on the front lines of taking care of our most vulnerable communities. Our in-home support services and nonprofit workers provide tremendous support and care for so many throughout San Francisco, but they often are paid the least, and like so many of our residents, are too often struggling to get by in an expensive city like San Francisco. San Francisco has always demonstrated a commitment in supporting our lowest wage workers. When the governor significantly reduced financial support to counties for in-home support services programs, San Francisco stepped up to fill in that gap. We have led the way in raising our minimum wage to one of the highest in the country, and we are continuing that leadership today with this legislation. The negotiations were difficult. Very difficult, and they were long. But that's because we all knew the importance of making sure that everyone had a seat at the table in this conversation. As a result, we have an ordinance that reflects our commitment in taking care of what are the lowest wage earners in San Francisco and moving them to a better place, although we know they deserve a lot more. Our in-home support service workers will see a wage increase of $3.75 from their current wage over the course of next 5 years. The minimum ordinance will also raise the wages of our city's contracted nonprofit workers for $1.50 over their current wage effective July 1 of 2019. And we should also mention the minimum compensation ordinance and how it's impacted the airport workers and their increase. This is part of my commitment as mayor to make sure that all San Franciscans have equal access to opportunities and can live in the communities they serve. San Francisco has some of the highest paying jobs in the nation, but we need to make sure that our economic success doesn't leave low and middle income families behind. By harnessing our thriving economy, we can lift up those communities who have been left behind for far too long and give them opportunities to succeed. This includes investing in what we're doing here today, and I am just really grateful to all of you for your hard work and the work that you continue to do to take care of so many of our elderly and disabled folks throughout San Francisco. And at this time, I'd like to bring up Supervisor Sandy Fewer, who is a lead sponsor on this legislation.
Thank you, Mayor Breed. I'd like to thank a couple of people here today that actually helped to make this happen. Of course, our labor partners and their leaders here today. The San Francisco Labor Council, SEIU 10-1, and SEIU 2015. Without their urging and direction, I don't think this would have happened, and their tenacity, actually, to stay at the table. I also would like to thank my co-sponsors, Supervisor Ronan, Supervisor Yee, and Supervisor Kim, and to recognize with us today, Supervisor Jeff Sheehy, who actually started this conversation. And then I would also like to take a moment to thank our mayor, Mayor Breed, and her wonderful staff, who came back again and again and again at the table to come to an agreement to serve these workers in San Francisco. I am honored to have helped create this legislation and to be part of this historic moment. This legislation is important for 3 reasons. 1, the immediate relief that it will give to over 20,000 of our low-wage workers. These workers who take care of our elderly, are disabled, people who staff our nonprofits. They themselves are struggling to make ends meet in this city. And who are they? They make $15 an hour currently. The average age of these workers is 58 years old. 88% of them are women, and almost 80% of them are people of color. They are on the verge of homelessness themselves. Second, this legislation demonstrates that we value this workforce. They do important, necessary work that binds our communities together, that allows our disabled and also our seniors to age in their own homes and with greater health outcomes, and also to greater mobility. And so I think it's so important that this legislation actually lifts up the work that they do, and the city as a whole recognizes how important that work is. And third, this reinforces our commitment to seniors and people with disabilities, children and their families. And we are planning for the future of our senior population that will increase 69% from 2010 to 2030. This, to be frank, is not a living wage in San Francisco. This will give workers some relief, but this is definitely not a living wage in San Francisco. We are experiencing the largest wealth gap that we have ever had historically in San Francisco. And these workers will continue to struggle as they do their hard work. This legislation today actually gives them some relief, but let's just be frank, it is not a living wage here in San Francisco. I think it was important that we did this because this is the right thing to do. In a city where an economy is booming, that some of our low-wage workers and moderate-wage workers should also have a share of the pie. And that we don't neglect our low-wage workers. As a city, we take responsibility for all, for our workers, for our seniors, for our disabled, everyone struggling to stay here in this city, who make up the fabric of what San Francisco is and who we are. This is a bold statement, and I just want to honor everyone that was at the table, and thank you to Mayor Breed and her staff once again for coming to this agreement. I'd like to take a moment also to introduce my colleague, Hillary Ronan, who was so instrumental working with me on this legislation. Supervisor Ronan.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Fewer. And I just wanted to make 2 quick points. I also wanted to thank the mayor. Your commitment, one of your biggest budget commitments that you've made this early to this workforce says a lot about your values. And we just want to thank you so much for that incredible, incredible commitment. And then number 2, this piece of legislation really shows and reminds us what San Francisco is all about. Not only do we do the morally right thing by our incredible workers who give so much love and support to our seniors and our homeless population and so many who are struggling to survive here in San Francisco, but this legislation is smart planning. We have an exploding senior population in San Francisco, and we don't have the infrastructure to take care of this population. We have a homeless crisis raging in our streets, and we depend on nonprofits who aren't able to hire the workforce to take care of those struggling the most. This legislation is so forward-thinking, and that's what San Francisco is known for. We have the heart, but also the brain to do the right thing and to think about our future. So congratulations, everyone. This is a wonderful, wonderful day. And a huge round of applause to my colleague, Supervisor Fewer, who is a fighter through and through. And it was so fun to work with her on this legislation. Thank you.
Oh, and now I'd like to introduce from the Labor Council, Rudy Gonzalez.
Good morning. I have to tell you that there are a lot of things that are left unfinished, and it's important. And coming from the labor movement, where miners and longshoremen in this very city were murdered for standing together, wow, is it a sign of the times that our workers were able to stand together. From electricians to teachers to Teamsters, airport workers, everybody stood shoulder to shoulder to make sure that this important legislation was realized. And I want to take a moment to thank and recognize the leadership of our Labor Council, our President Mike Casey, our Secretary Treasurer Olga Miranda from Local 87, who's here in the audience this morning. Without their mentorship and advice and counsel, we wouldn't have been able to negotiate this historic agreement. I want to say that coming from our movement, we're used to being attacked. We're used to being in a moment of resistance or in an existence of resistance. It's important, and I want our electeds to hear this. It's also okay to celebrate these wins. We have a lot of things that we disagree on policy-wise, but this is a statement of our values, and this is a time to celebrate, because the lowest paid people in our city are getting the attention and the commitment of this fine government. And this is an example of people coming to a table with leadership. An initiative that was started 18 months when some people weren't even in elected office at the time, and coming together and saying, we're going to pick up the pieces, we're going to do the hard work, we're going to commit our staff and commit this city, our budget, and our values to doing something for the people who need it most. And when I say the people who need it most, I also want to include the clients. We talk about our aging population, but there are also disabled children that need care and that many of our siblings at Local 2015 take care of. Some of the most vulnerable in our city who need residential care and addiction treatment and counseling services and housing services and supportive services, they're being served not only by our public employees in our city, but by our nonprofit workers, and they also deserve our assistance. So I want to take a moment to recognize the incredible leadership of our mayor, Mayor Breed, who took this issue head on. Supervisors Fewer and Ronan and Supervisor Yee and everyone who voted to support this, Supervisor Kim, obviously. I also want to recognize the staff. Our elected leaders and folks like me get to take credit for these things, but without Andrea Bruss and Kanishka and people at the team, without Carolyn and Beth and everybody in the supervisor's office who were dedicated to seeing this thing through, and all the courageous workers, this would not have been possible. So with that, I want to introduce you to one of these courageous workers, one of the people who actually gets this work done, who lets aging people age in place with dignity and with health. Claudia Arevalo, will you join me, please? Claudia is a 25-year in-home health worker, and I want to let her say a few words about what she does.
Buenos días. Así como dice Rudy, soy una trabajadora de cuidado en casa por 25 años y he andado como 22 años en el movimiento laboral, y quiero reconocer al mayor porque ahora es un día muy histórico donde ella firma un aumento por 4 años.
Yes, as Rudy was saying, my name is Claudia Arevalo. I'm an in-home care support services worker. I've been doing this work for 25 years. Of those 25 years, I've been involved in the union movement 22 of those years. I'm so excited to be here today. This is a historic day as Mayor Breed signs this important legislation that will have a huge impact on our lives.
Y quiero agradecer también a un grupo de supervisores que también trabajaron a la par de nosotros, igual como la mayor. Eso quiere decir que nuestro trabajo lo están reconociendo ya.
I also want to recognize the incredible and fierce leadership of several boards of supervisors who, because of their leadership, we were able to get to this final deal. I feel like, as a home care service worker, that finally our work is being recognized, that we do have dignity and respect.
Yo sabía que ella nos iba a apoyar porque cuando ella habló con nosotros, ella hizo el trabajo que nosotros y que yo hago. Y por eso ella tenía que apoyarnos y firmar el aumento porque el trabajo de nosotros es muy duro y mal pagado.
I remember when Mayor Breed met with many of us workers of home care, and she actually has a home care story as well, and she understands how difficult this work is. So I was not surprised when she made a decision to sign this legislation.
Yeah. Y esto va a ser histórico y va a ser un mensaje para todo California porque San Francisco es el número 1 que va a ganar más que todo California. Gracias.
And I just want to remind everyone, without a doubt, this has a tremendous impact on the roughly 20,000 home care providers here in San Francisco. But the day after the election, this also sends a message that the city and county of San Francisco has created a new standard for home care providers. That message will be sent across the country, across the region, and throughout the state of California. Thank you, Si Se Puede.
Yeah. Gracias. Gracias a Mayor y gracias a los supervisores que sí nos apoyaron y saben de nuestro trabajo. Gracias.
Thank you again, Mayor and Supervisors, for your support and for understanding and valuing the important work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And I'd also like to recognize other supervisors who have joined us today. It was a unanimous vote at the Board of Supervisors, including the leadership. The president of the Board of Supervisors, Malia Cohen, is here, along with Supervisor Safai and Supervisor Yi. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's get to the important task, and I'm going to ask former Supervisor Jeff Sheehy to join us as well as the original sponsor of the legislation as we sign this very important piece of legislation to guarantee the commitment that we are making as a city for in-home support services workers and nonprofit workers in San Francisco. Thank you all so much for being here today. Are we ready? Yeah!